The whistle blew so shrill it made Fletcher Karr blink twice. He hadn't even seen the alien's mouth move if it had a mouth, which was still up for debate. "Begin," barked the coach, his blue carapace shimmering under the arena's lighting grid. He was tall, easily over 7 feet, built like he'd been carved from a glacier and dipped in chrome. His name was Krek, and he had the enthusiasm of a drill sergeant with a caffeine addiction. Fletcher adjusted the straps on his hydration pack and looked around at the others. There were 16 competitors, most of them from species he couldn't pronounce. A few looked like upright lizards, one was a floating jellyfish with robotic limbs, and one massive brute with skin like bark cracked his knuckles with a sound like breaking branches. Fletcher was the only human. "Endurance trial begins now," Krek announced. "No rest until only one remains." "Wait, no rest," Fletcher stepped forward. "Like no breaks at all, not even to sleep." Krek turned to him slowly, his eyes glowing faintly. "Correct, no sleep, no pause, no assistance. Your species signed the participation waiver." "That waiver was like 30 pages, Fletcher muttered. "No one reads those. Humans are known for adaptability," Krek said. "You will prove it." The arena was circular, maybe 500 feet in diameter, with terrain that shifted every 12 hours. Right now, it was a desert simulation, sand so fine it got into everything, heat lamps baking from above, and scattered plateaus jutting out like forgotten ruins. The first hour was just running laps. Easy enough, Fletcher thought. He'd been a Division I track runner back in college. He paced himself, letting some of the others surge ahead. The jellyfish floated on some kind of propulsion system and looked smug, if that was even possible for a floating mucus bag. By hour 4, the sand had started to shift beneath their feet. Hidden treadmills cycled the floor, making each step a little harder. Krek watched from his observation tower with a data pad in his claws, recording vitals, performance, and probably betting odds. Fletcher kept going. The jellyfish dropped first. It floated to the outer edge and beeped twice before crumpling onto a padded platform. Krek didn't even look up. By hour 9, the terrain changed. The sand receded and metal panels slid outward, forming steep inclines and rotating cylinders. Fletcher stumbled the first time he hit one of the rollers, slamming his knee into the platform. He cursed, limped for a minute, then adjusted his gait. A lizard creature with emerald scales tried to leap over one of the rotating cylinders and caught its foot mid-spin. It tumbled down, screeching in its own language, and landed in a heap. Krek simply tapped his pad. "Endurance is not just physical," the coach said. "It is will." "It is survival." Fletcher gritted his teeth. "I get it, you're trying to break us." "No," Krek replied. "I am trying to find out who cannot be broken." By hour 16, Fletcher had stopped talking. His shirt clung to him with sweat, and his water pack was nearly dry. The heat was gone now, replaced by a cold simulation, the temperature dropping by the minute. Ice formed on the metal panels. The incline steepened. He slipped once, caught his balance, and kept moving. A creature with 6 legs and gills on its neck gave a wheezing gasp and collapsed near the edge. Fletcher didn't stop. He couldn't. Krek paced the observation deck now, watching each remaining competitor with surgical focus. Fletcher's vision started playing tricks on him. For a second, he thought he saw his high school gym teacher in the stands, waving and eating cotton candy. Then it blinked away. He shook his head. "Stay awake, stay moving." By hour 24, there were only 4 left. Fletcher, the bark-skinned giant, a thin insectoid that moved like a praying mantis, and a short, hunched alien with eyes like dark marbles. The bark-skinned giant Korak was flagging. His gait slowed. Fletcher heard him groan low and guttural before he dropped to one knee. Krek shouted something, but Korak's head hung low. He didn't rise. 3 left. Fletcher's legs burned. Every step was a negotiation between pain and balance. He'd long since lost feeling in his left foot. His right knee throbbed with each bend, but he kept going. "You are human," Krek said from above. "You rely on sleep to reset your systems. This is your disadvantage." Fletcher looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "Then I'll just have to break the rules of biology." The insectoid stumbled next. It tried to climb one of the rotating walls and slipped, hitting the floor with a thud. Its limbs twitched, then stilled. 2 left, Fletcher and the hunched one. The terrain shifted again. Now it was a simulated tundra ice, wind, and sleet. The arena's ceiling projected a storm, and faux snow slammed down in sheets. Fletcher's teeth chattered. His fingers were numb, his lips cracked from cold and dehydration. The hunched alien moved steadily, unaffected by the cold. Krek watched with interest. This is the phase where the mind fails. Fletcher didn't answer. He focused on his steps. Left, right, no rhythm, just movement. His thoughts drifted to his sister, to his old college roommate, to the smell of barbecue on a summer evening in Ohio. He imagined the taste of water. He stumbled. His hand hit the frozen ground, scraping his palm open. Blood smeared across the ice. He pushed himself up. Krek's voice echoed. "You bleed now. You are nearing collapse." Fletcher laughed under his breath. "You think I don't know that?" The hunched alien began to slow. Its breathing was erratic. It paused near one of the wind tunnels, visibly trembling. Fletcher leaned forward, forcing his legs to move. He passed it. One lap, then two, then three. The alien collapsed on the fourth. Krek blew the whistle. Endurance trial complete. Fletcher didn't stop right away. He took another step, then another. Then finally, his knees gave out and he hit the ground hard, face first into the frozen surface. He didn't get up. He woke up in the med bay. His legs were wrapped in compression sleeves, and Ives snaked out from both arms. His lips were coated in balm. He tried to speak, but only managed a dry grunt. A nurse human hovered nearby. "Don't talk, rest." "How long?" he rasped. "You've been unconscious for almost 20 hours. Severe dehydration, muscle trauma, and minor frostbite, but you're stable now." Krek entered the room silently. His data pad hovered beside him. "You endured," the coach said. "You exceeded expectations." Fletcher closed his eyes. "I'm not doing that again." "No, you will recover." "Then we will begin phase 2. Fletcher opened one eye. "There's a phase 2? Krek tilted his head. "Endurance is layered." Fletcher groaned and let his head fall back against the pillow. He was alive. Barely, but alive, and he hadn't slept for over 50 hours. The lights in the med bay dimmed automatically every 6 hours. Fletcher had counted them twice now. The third cycle had just begun, which meant he'd been off his feet for 18 hours. He lay flat, his legs elevated, a dull ache crawling from his lower spine to his toes. His muscles still trembled at random intervals, like they were trying to flee his body in protest. Beside him, a transparent panel displayed vitals in a mix of alien script and translated glyphs. The translation for muscle integrity flickered between yellow and red. A squat, pale-skinned medic entered without knocking. He was shaped like a melting pyramid with 6-finger-like appendages and no visible eyes. A faint scent of vinegar followed him. "You've metabolized 3 liters of hydration gel," the medic said in a clipped tone. "Your renal system is under strain, but you're stabilizing. You've also absorbed 300 grams of synthetic protein paste. You are currently digesting at 21% efficiency." Fletcher blinked at the ceiling. "I'd kill for a peanut butter sandwich." "That would be catastrophic," the medic said. "Your digestive lining is still inflamed." "I didn't mean literally." The medic paused, then tapped something on his tablet. "Human idioms are still poorly indexed." Clarification noted. Footsteps approached heavier, deliberate. Fletcher didn't need to turn his head. Krek's gait was unmistakable. Each step gave off a faint metallic resonance like a war drum being politely played. "You remain functional," Krek said. "Barely," Fletcher muttered. "You demonstrated capacity beyond expected thresholds. Several observers petitioned for your disqualification. They believed your behavior indicated neurological compromise." "I was hallucinating a little," Fletcher admitted. "Might have tried to high-five a lighting fixture. Your persistence caused recalibration of multiple endurance parameters," Krek said flatly. "Even the Zarnathi did not anticipate you would continue beyond the 30-hour mark." Fletcher turned his head slowly. "Remind me who the Zarnathi are again." "They constructed the simulation's psychological stressors. They wagered your species would collapse under dream withdrawal within 22 hours. I'll send them a thank you card when my spine reattaches." Krek moved closer, claws folded behind his back. "You are recovering faster than projected. I have scheduled your re-entry into conditioning within 4 days." Fletcher tried to sit up and immediately regretted everything. "You're joking." "I am not." This isn't the military. I'm not even technically employed here. You volunteered. I thought it was a cultural exchange. I didn't realize it would involve Arctic hypothermia and treadmill cliffs. Krek narrowed his gaze. Your sarcasm is noted. You will return to training. Phase 2 is not optional. The medic tapped his interface. He will require at least 36 hours before attempting vertical movement. His leg musculature is still in titanic recovery. Then he will begin upper body resistance early, Krek said. We have buoyant chambers, resistance without full weight bearing. Fletcher groaned. I'm not even allowed to finish rehydrating before you start dunking me in a tank. You elected to represent your species. Your performance has redefined human parameters. You will continue. Krek left without further discussion. The medic adjusted Fletcher's bed angle by a few degrees. You are fortunate. Krek only trains organisms he considers capable of adaptation. Yeah, lucky me. 3 days passed. The first time Fletcher stood upright, he blacked out after 9 seconds. By the 5th day, he could walk unsupported for 30 steps before collapsing on a padded mat. His legs still spasmed randomly, but the pain had dulled into something manageable. On the morning of the 7th day, the medic released him into aquatic adaptation protocols. The buoyancy tank was housed in a separate chamber, filled with thick gel that smelled faintly of overripe citrus. Fletcher floated inside a transparent cylinder, breathing through a rebreather mask. Alien trainers monitored his vitals from outside, occasionally pulsing the gel to simulate ocean currents. After 20 minutes of slow resistance exercises, a new voice crackled through the intercom. You are adjusting adequately. Krek stood behind the glass, arms folded. He gestured, and the current increased. The gel thickened, turning his movements into slow-motion ballet. Fletcher's arms shook with effort. You sure this isn't just intergalactic hazing? Adaptation is the only reliable predictor of survival, Krek said. You are not being tested. You are being honed. Feels like I'm being tenderized. Krek watched silently for a full minute. Then, the other competitors have requested reassignment. Your performance has unsettled their confidence. Great, I'm the sweaty ghost that haunts their dreams. Krek's tone didn't shift. They believed your endurance was synthetic. It wasn't, it was. Really bad decision-making. This is why you are valuable. When the session ended, Fletcher had to be extracted manually. His arms refused to obey commands. He was wheeled out on a floating platform, wrapped in thermal foam, and wheeled into a chamber that smelled of ozone and metal polish. Inside, Krek stood beside a console displaying a rotating model of a planet Fletcher didn't recognize. It had 4 moons and an atmosphere that glowed yellow. This is Dravex 5, Krek said. Phase 2 will occur here. Fletcher blinked. I'm not sure I'm ready for a planet with 5 suns and gravity that gives you arthritis. It has 1 sun. The glow is from ionized sulfur. Charming. You will be inserted into a local survival scenario. You will have no tools, no map, and no contact. Your objective is to reach an extraction beacon within 72 hours. Fletcher stared at the projection. That's not a training exercise. That's Bear Grylls meets Alien Mordor. You have demonstrated capacity for self-regulation under extreme deprivation. This will test your improvisational resilience. Can't I just go back to the treadmill cliffs? You've already mastered them. Fletcher leaned back against the foam, his shoulders slumping. I haven't even relearned how to jog. You will be provided with a mobility exosuit calibrated to your recovery stage. It will amplify movement, not replace it. Oh good, so I'll look like a limping Mech pilot. You will be monitored remotely. Intervention will occur only upon life-threatening failure. Fletcher closed his eyes. That's not comforting. It was not intended to be. An hour later, he was back in his room, staring at the ceiling. The medic returned with a new set of injections and a protein bar that tasted like chalk dipped in algae. You are progressing within acceptable margins, the medic said. You have not exhibited panic responses. Yet, the medic paused. You are unusual. Most species exhibit early-stage dread after isolation training. Humans are bad at knowing when to quit. The medic tapped his data pad. That explains your cardiovascular persistence. It does not explain your emotional detachment. Fletcher glanced at the ceiling. We're used to being out of our depth. It's kind of our thing. The medic left him in silence. By nightfall, Fletcher couldn't sleep. Not because he wasn't tired, his body was begging for rest, but because his brain had started cycling through possible ways to survive whatever sulfuric nightmare Krek had planned. He pulled the sheet over his head and began listing, silently, everything he remembered from old survival documentaries. Fire from friction, solar stills, snake venom milking. None of it felt relevant to a planet with glowing skies and unknown predators, but he kept listing. Because that's what his species did. They kept going, even when it made no sense. Even when the smart thing would have been to lie down and let exhaustion win. The shuttle to Dravex 5 rattled like it had been assembled with leftover parts from 5 different species, none of whom had agreed on what gravity should feel like. Fletcher sat strapped in the narrow seat, wedged between a translucent crate labeled emergency hydration spores and a hibernating insectoid with mandibles twitching in its sleep. His mobility exosuit felt like a second skin made of stiff rubber bands. It hissed occasionally, adjusting pressure along his calves and thighs, and made his legs feel like they were being politely strangled by a robot. He kept flexing his toes just to prove he still had them. Across from him, a lanky technician with moss-colored skin and 2 sets of eyelids stared without blinking. It didn't seem hostile, just curious in that unnerving, clinical way someone might regard a misbehaving toaster. "You are the human," the tech said. "I've been accused. You metabolize cortisol inefficiently. You should have succumbed to neurofatigue." Fletcher tilted his head. "Is that a compliment or a medical concern? Neither. It is improbable." The shuttle jerked as it entered the upper atmosphere of Dravex 5. The crate beside Fletcher tilted slightly, and a gel bubble rolled from a crack in its seam, popped on the floor, and evaporated in a hiss of citrus-scented mist. The technician didn't even flinch. "Is that supposed to happen?" "No. Should we do something about it?" "Not anymore." The landing was abrupt. Not violent, just final, like the planet had caught the shuttle mid-fall and decided it was done moving. The hatch opened. Heat hit him first, dense and swampy, like a sauna that had been built in a compost bin. The sky was the color of overripe bananas, and the air smelled faintly of copper and fungus. Krek was waiting, standing near a translucent dome set into the ground. He held a small, round device which he handed to Fletcher without ceremony. "This is your beacon locator. It will activate when you are within 200 meters of the extraction point. Until then, it is inert." "Neat," Fletcher said. "Like a very stressful game of hotter or colder. You have 72 hours. There are no artificial landmarks. The terrain will shift periodically. So the ground moves. The tectonics are partially liquid. You will adapt." Fletcher stared out at the gnarled landscape. The trees looked like petrified coral, and the ground pulsed faintly, as if it were breathing underground. "Any local wildlife I should avoid. If something moves toward you, do not assume it is curious." "I'll take that as a yes." Krek didn't say goodbye. He simply stepped back into the dome. A moment later, it sealed behind him with a wet hiss. Fletcher took his first steps into the terrain. The exosuit adjusted with each motion, adding just enough support to keep him upright without feeling like it was doing the walking for him. His legs still felt used, but no longer on the verge of mutiny. The first few hours passed in a steady rhythm of calculated trudging. The heat pressed in like a damp fist. His water ration, piped through the suit's collar, tasted like sterilized algae. The beacon device remained a sullen gray disk in his hand. By late afternoon, the ground shifted beneath him, not violently, but enough to throw his balance if he wasn't paying attention. He paused, crouched, and laid a palm on the soil. It vibrated faintly, like the hum of an old refrigerator. He adjusted his route. Around dusk, the air thickened. A mist rose from the ground, curling around his knees and climbing like it had intent. He tried holding his breath, but the suit filtered most airborne particulates anyway. Still, he coughed once sharp and dry. A low whine echoed across the plain, not mechanical, not wind. He crouched behind a cluster of twisted, barkless trees and held his breath again. Something moved past, four-legged, hairless, with skin that shimmered like oil. It sniffed the air with no visible nostrils and moved on. Fletcher waited until the sound faded. That night, he found shelter beneath an overhanging rock shelf that seemed stable enough. He didn't sleep. The suit's internal clock reminded him he'd been awake for over 20 hours again, but he didn't feel the same collapse coming. The training had done something, recalibrated his tolerance for exhaustion, maybe. He chewed a protein bar that tasted like seaweed and clay, then leaned his head back and stared at the sky. No stars. Just a yellow haze pulsing faintly with atmospheric ionization. He laughed once, short and hard. "You volunteered for this," he whispered. The second day was worse. The terrain changed completely. Where there had been a forest of stone trees, now there were pits, deep craters that exhaled steam every few minutes. The ground had cracked and shifted like a puzzle partway through solving itself. He had to detour twice to avoid sinkholes. Midday, he fell. Not far, just enough to twist his ankle slightly when a ledge gave way under his left foot. The suit compensated, stiffening around the joint with a hiss, but the pain was real. He limped for 2 hours. The beacon still showed nothing. By evening, dehydration began to creep in. The suit's reservoir was nearly empty. He tried licking condensation off a leaf, but it tasted metallic and left his tongue numb for 10 minutes. He kept moving. That night, a storm rolled in. Not rain, something else. A static field built in the sky, then descended in a silent flash. The air around him buzzed like a power line. His hair stood on end. He dropped flat, arms over his head. When it passed, his fingertips tingled for an hour. On the third day, the beacon blinked once, just a single red dot. He was close. He adjusted course, moving through a shallow ravine lined with moss that glowed faintly underfoot. The ground here was stable, cooler, and he picked up speed despite the ache in his legs and the growing thirst that turned every swallow into sandpaper. He crested a ridge and saw it. A black spire, maybe 3 meters tall, humming softly. The beacon in his hand vibrated, then glowed green. He stumbled the last 50 meters. The spire opened at the top, revealing a pod just large enough for one. He climbed in without ceremony, collapsed into the padded interior, and let the restraints close around him. As the lid sealed, the pod filled with cool, filtered air. He exhaled slowly. When he woke, he was back in the med bay. This time, the pain was manageable. His ankle was braced, his hydration restored, and the worst of the fatigue had passed. The same medic hovered nearby, tapping gently on a tablet. "You completed the trial in 68 hours. Didn't feel that fast. Your cardiac rhythm remained within survivable range, despite exertion and fluid loss. You experienced mild renal stress but no permanent damage. Glad to hear it. You hallucinated during hour 57. Fletcher blinked. "I did. You attempted to converse with a rock formation." The medic looked up. "You asked it about tax reform." Fletcher rubbed his eyes. "Sounds about right." The door opened. Krek entered without fanfare, data pad in one claw. "You survived. Thanks for noticing. You reached the beacon faster than any previous participant. The Dravex terrain was designed to break linear cognition. You maintained directional logic through 3 environmental transitions. I kept turning toward the wind. It always came from the same direction." Krek paused. "That was not accounted for, I figured." There was a long silence. "You are dismissed from further trials," Krek said. Fletcher blinked. "Wait, I passed. You endured, you adapted, you improvised, you demonstrated the 3 criteria of survival capacity." "So, I'm done," Krek nodded once. "You have redefined the baseline for human capability. Further testing would be superfluous." Fletcher let his head fall back onto the pillow. "I'm going to sleep for a week. You will be returned to Earth with full diplomatic honors." He opened one eye. "Diplomatic. Your performance has shifted interspecies perceptions. Humanity is now classified as a high-resilience species." Fletcher let out a soft, exhausted laugh. "Great, we're officially stubborn." Krek turned to leave, then paused. "You conversed with a rock." "I don't want to talk about it." Krek nodded, and the door closed behind him. Fletcher stared at the ceiling, then pulled the blanket up. He slept for 30 hours. No dreams, no interruptions, just silence and rest.